Chapter 11. The priest took me away in a borrowed cart. He said that he would find someone in a nearby village to take care of me until the end of the war. Before reaching the village, we stopped at the local church. The priest left me in the cart and went alone to the vicarage, where I saw him arguing with the vicar. They gesticulated and whispered agitatedly. Then they both came towards me. I jumped off the cart and bowed politely to the vicar, kissing his sleeve. He looked at me, gave me his blessing, and returned to the vicarage without saying another word. The priest drove on and finally stopped at the far end of the village at a rather isolated farmhouse. He went in and stayed there so long that I began to wonder if something had happened to him. A huge wolfhound with a sullen, downcast expression guarded the farmyard. The priest came out, accompanied by a short, thick-set peasant. The dog tucked its tail under his hindquarters and stopped growling. The man looked at me and then stepped aside with the priest. I could hear only snatches of their conversation. The farmer was obviously upset. Pointing to me, he shouted that one look was enough to tell that I was an unbaptized gypsy bastard. The priest quietly protested, but the man would not listen. He argued that keeping me might expose him to great danger, since the Germans often visited the village, and if they found me, it would be too late for any intervention. The priest was gradually losing his patience. He suddenly took the man by the arm and whispered something into his ear. The peasant became subdued, and cursing, told me to follow him into his hut. The priest came closer to me and looked into my eyes. We stared at each other in silence. I did not quite know what to do. Trying to kiss his hand, I kissed my own sleeve and became confused. He laughed, made the sign of the cross over my head, and departed. As soon as he was sure that the priest was gone, the man grabbed me by the ear, almost lifted me off the ground, and pulled me into the hut. When I yelled, he jabbed me in the ribs with his fingers so hard that I became breathless. There were 3 of us in the household: the farmer, Garbos, who had a dead, unsmiling face and half-open mouth, the dog, Judas, with sly, glowering eyes, and myself. Garbos was a widower. Sometimes, in the course of an argument, neighbors would mention to an orphan Jewish girl called Lilka, whom Garbos took as a boarder from her escaping parents some time ago. Whenever one of Garbos' cows or pigs damaged some of the crops, the villagers would maliciously remind him of the girl. They would say that he used to beat her daily, rape her, and force her to commit depravities until she finally vanished. Meanwhile, Garbos renovated his farm with the money he received for her keep. Garbos listened angrily to such accusations. He would unleash Judas and threaten to set him against the slanderers. Each time the neighbors locked their doors and watched the evil beast through their windows. No one ever visited Garbos. He always sat alone in his hut. My job was to look after 2 pigs, a cow, a dozen hens, and 2 turkeys. Without saying a word, Garbos used to beat me, unexpectedly, and for no reason. He would steal behind me and hit me in the legs with a whip. He would twist my ears, rub his thumb in my hair, and tickle my armpits and feet until I shook uncontrollably. He regarded me as a gypsy and ordered me to tell gypsy stories. But all I could recite were the poems and stories I had learned at home before the war. Listening to them would sometimes infuriate Garbos. For what reason I never knew. He would beat me again, or threaten to turn Judas loose on me. Judas was a constant menace. He could kill a man with one snap of his jaws. The neighbors often reproached Garbos for having unleashed the beast on someone stealing apples. The thief's throat was torn out, and he died immediately. Garbos always incited Judas against me. Gradually the dog must have become convinced that I was his worst enemy. The sight of me was enough to make him bristle like a porcupine. His bloodshot eyes, his nose, and his lips quivered, and froth dripped over his ugly fangs. He strained towards me with such force that I was afraid he might break the guide wire, though I also hoped that he would strangle himself on his leash. Seeing the dog's fury and my fear, Garbos would sometimes untie Judas, led him only by the collar, and would make him back me against the wall. The growling, sputtering mouth was only inches from my throat, and the animal's big body shook with savage fury. He nearly choked, frothing and spitting, while the man urged him on with hard words and sharp proddings. He came so close that his warm, moist breath dampened my face. At such moments life would almost pass out of me, and my blood would flow through my veins with a slow, sluggish drip, like heavy spring honey strained through the narrow neck of a bottle. My terror was such that it nearly transported me to the other world. I looked at the beast's burning eyes and at the man's hairy, freckled hand gripping the collar. At any moment the dog's teeth might close over my flesh. Not wanting to suffer, I would push my neck forward for the first quick bite. I understood then the fox's mercy in killing geese by severing their necks in one snap. But Garbos did not release the dog. Instead, he sat down in front of me drinking home-brewed vodka and marveling aloud why such as I were permitted to live when his boys had died so young. He often asked me that question, and I did not know what to reply. When I failed to answer, he would hit me. I could not understand what he wanted from me, or why he beat me. I tried to keep out of his way. I did as I was told, but he continued the beatings. At night, Garbos would sneak into the kitchen where I slept, and awaken me by yelling it into my ear. When I jumped up with a scream, he laughed, while Judas struggled on his chain outside, ready to fight. At other times, when I was sleeping, Garbos would take the dog quietly into the room, tie its muzzle with rags, and then throw the animal on top of me in the darkness. The dog rolled over me while I, overcome by terror, not knowing where I was or what was happening, fought against the huge hairy beast that was scratching me with its paws. One day the vicar came in a dog cart to see Garbos. The priest blessed us both, and then he noticed the black and blue welts on my shoulders and neck, and demanded who had beaten me and why. Garbos admitted that he had to beat me to punish me for laziness. The vicar then admonished him mildly, and told him to bring me to the church the next day. As soon as the priest had left, Garbos took me inside, stripped me, and flogged me with a willow switch, avoiding only the visible parts, such as my face, arms, and legs. As usual, he forbade me to cry, but when he hit a more sensitive spot, I could not stand the pain and let out a whimper. Droplets of sweat appeared on his forehead, and a vein started swelling on his neck. He jammed some thick canvas in my mouth, passing his tongue over his dry lips, continued flogging me. Early the next morning, I started on my way to church. My shirt and pants were sticking to the bloody patches on the back and on the buttocks. But Garbos warned me that if I whispered a word about the beating, he would set Judas on me in the evening. I bit my lip, swearing that I would not say a word and hoping that the vicar would not notice anything. In the brightening light of dawn, a crowd of aged women waited in front of the church. Their feet and bodies were swathed in strips of cloth and wraps of old sorts, and they babbled endless words of prayer while their cold, benumbed fingers shifted the rosary beads. When they saw the priest coming, they rose unsteadily, teetering on their knotty canes, and rapidly shuffled to meet him, contesting for priority and kissing his greasy sleeve. I stood aside, tried to remain unnoticed, but those with the best sight stared at me with disgust, called me a vampire or a gypsy foundling, and spat 3 times in my direction. The church always overwhelmed me, and yet it was one of the many houses of God scattered all over the world. God did not live in any of them, but it was assumed for some reason that he was present in all of them at once. He was like the unexpected guest for whom the wealthier farmers always kept an additional place at their table. The priest noticed me and patted my hair warmly. I grew confused as I answered his questions, assuring him that I was now obedient and that the farmer did not have to beat me any more. The priest asked me about my parents, about our pre-war home, and about the church which we had attended, but which I could not remember very well. Realizing my total ignorance of religion and church observances, he took me to the organist and asked him to explain the meaning of the liturgical objects and to start preparing me for the service as an altar boy at the morning mass and vespers. I began coming to church twice a week. I waited at the back until the old woman had crawled into their pews, and then I took my back seat, close to the holy water font, which mystified me tremendously. The water looked like any other water. It had no color, no odor. It looked far less impressive than, for example, ground horse bones. Yet its magic power was supposed to far exceed that of any herb, incantation, or mixture that I had ever seen.